The digital clock on my dashboard glowed a sickly green, 2:17 a.m. I'd been driving for 14 hours straight, and the vast, flat expanse of Nebraska was testing the very limits of my sanity. My name is Alex Rourke, and this cross-country move from Philadelphia to Seattle was supposed to be an adventure. Right now, it felt like a punishment. The caffeine from my last energy drink had worn off, leaving behind a brittle, jangly exhaustion that made my eyes feel full of sand. Every muscle in my body ached from being locked in the same position for so long, and the hum of my old SUV's engine had become a monotonous drone that seemed to be slowly erasing my thoughts. I was running on fumes in every sense of the word. My fuel gauge was hovering just above the red warning line, and my spirit was right there with it. I'd been counting on making it to the next major truck stop, but the last sign had been brutally clear. Next services, 68 miles. My heart had sunk into my stomach. There was no way. My beat-up Jeep Cherokee was many things, but a fuel-sipping marvel it was not. "Damn it," I whispered to the empty cabin, the sound of my own voice strange and thin. The darkness outside was absolute, a wall of blackness broken only by the twin cones of my headlights. The endless fields of corn or soy or whatever they grew out here were just a deeper shadow, a rustling, living entity that felt like it was watching me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my palms slick with sweat. My options were terrible: risk stalling out on the interstate, a sitting duck in the middle of nowhere, or take the next exit and pray for a miracle. A few minutes later, my prayer was answered in the most ominous way possible. A sign materialized in the gloom: Exit 122, Prairie Creek, 1 mile. No gas station symbol, no food icon, just a name. It was a gamble, but it was the only one I had. I flicked my turn signal, the rhythmic clicking sounding like a countdown, and guided the Jeep down the off-ramp. The road it led to was a narrow, cracked ribbon of asphalt called County Road 743. It was even darker than the highway, if that was possible. There were no streetlights, no reflective markers, just my headlights fighting a losing battle against the void. I drove for 5 miles, my anxiety mounting with each one. Nothing. No houses, no distant glows of towns, just the occasional skeletal outline of a long-abandoned barn against the starry sky. The feeling of isolation was so complete it was suffocating. Just as I was about to give up, turn around, and face my fate on the interstate, I saw it. A weak, yellowish glow in the distance, off to the left. As I drew closer, it resolved into a single bare bulb hanging from a splintered wooden post, illuminating a scene straight out of a nightmare. It was a gas station, but that term was too generous. It was a shack. A single rust-pitted pump stood sentinel before a small, clapboard building, whose white paint had long since surrendered to gray, peeling neglect. A hand-painted sign, the letters bleeding down the wood, read, "Hanks." Below it, in smaller, cruder script, "Gas. Worms." Worms, of course. Because nothing says, "You can trust this place," like a side business in live bait in the middle of a wheat field. Worms, of course. Because nothing says, "You can trust this place," like a side business in live bait in the middle of a wheat field. My fuel warning light blinked on, a persistent red eye of accusation. I had no choice. I pulled onto the uneven gravel lot, the crunch of the stones under my tires far too loud in the profound silence. I turned off the engine, and the sudden quiet was a physical weight. I sat for a full minute, just listening to the ticks and pings of the cooling engine and the frantic thumping of my own heart. Steeling myself, I pushed the door open and stepped out. The air was cool and carried the scent of dry earth and something else, something faintly metallic and sour. The old pump was a mechanical dinosaur. I tried lifting the nozzle, but it was dead. Locked. Of course. I'd have to go inside. The door to the shack was warped, and it stuck as I pushed it open, a little brass bell jangling a discordant note above my head. The inside was a time capsule. The air was thick with the smells of dust, stale tobacco, and that same damp, earthy scent of bait. A few sparse shelves held an assortment of motor oil, ancient-looking bags of chips, and, true to the sign, coolers full of styrofoam containers. A single fly-specked fluorescent tube flickered overhead. From a bead-curtained doorway behind the counter, a man emerged. He was tall and gaunt, wearing a stained trucker hat and a denim jacket that had seen better decades. His face was all sharp angles and sallow skin, and his eyes were the flat, lifeless gray of a dead fish. He didn't speak, just stared at me, waiting. "Hi," I said, my voice cracking. I cleared my throat. I need gas. The pump outside." "Cash, up front," he interrupted, his voice a low rasp. "How much?" I fumbled for my wallet. "Can you just fill it? I'll pay whatever it is." He shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Prepay. Only." "Right. Okay. $40? I handed him 2 20s. His fingers were long and bony, his nails rimmed with grime. He took the bills, turned, and flipped a heavy switch on the wall. A loud clunk echoed from outside. "You're good," he said. And then, without another word, he turned and disappeared back through the beads, which clacked together behind him. I stood there for a second, unnerved by the entire interaction. Shaking it off, I hurried back to my Jeep and shoved the nozzle into the tank. The mechanical dials began to whir and click, spinning slowly. As I stood there in that pool of weak light, the silence felt heavy, watchful. I had the distinct skin-crawling feeling that I was being watched from the darkness of the fields. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but there was nothing. Just the endless, whispering night. When the pump clicked off, I practically threw the nozzle back onto its cradle, jumped into my Jeep, and started the engine. The roar was a welcome, human sound. I pulled out of that gravel lot faster than was safe, kicking up a spray of stones, and sped back down County Road 743 toward the interstate. The feeling of relief was so intense, it was almost dizzying. It was short-lived. As I merged back onto I-80, accelerating to match the flow of the few other late-night travelers, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. They were unusually bright, high off the ground, like those of a large truck or an old SUV. They were a fair distance back, so I thought nothing of it, just another lonely soul on the road. But over the next 30 minutes, that distance never changed. I sped up. The lights kept pace. I moved to the middle lane. The lights eventually drifted into the middle lane. I slowed down, letting a semi-truck pass me. The lights slowed down too, always maintaining that same fixed interval. A cold knot began to tighten in my gut. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Just someone else cruising at a steady speed. But the coincidence was too stark, too precise. This vehicle had appeared right after. The panic was a live wire in my chest, sizzling and snapping, driving out all rational thought. I didn't even pause at the bottom of the off-ramp. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the Jeep's engine roaring in protest as I tore through the empty intersection and shot straight back up the on-ramp to the interstate. My eyes were glued to the rearview mirror. The vehicle with the blinding lights emerged from the off-ramp and smoothly merged back onto the highway behind me, closing the distance I had just created with terrifying ease. They weren't even trying to hide it now. This was a pursuit. My mind raced, a frantic slideshow of every true crime podcast and horror movie I'd ever consumed. Don't go home. Don't lead them to where you live. But I didn't have a home here. I was in a metal box screaming across the Great Plains with a predator on my tail. My original plan, powering through to a hotel in Cheyenne, was now impossible. That was a destination, a fixed point they could anticipate. I had to be unpredictable. I saw a sign for a rest area in 2 miles, a public place with other people. Maybe there would be truckers, families, a police cruiser, safety in numbers. It was my only hope. I signaled and moved into the exit lane, my heart in my throat. I watched the mirror. The lights followed. The rest area was a disappointment. It was a small, poorly lit loop with a brick building housing restrooms and a few vending machines. Only 3 other vehicles were there. A lone semi-truck, its driver likely asleep in the cab, and 2 cars covered in road dust, both empty. There were no people. The silence was deep, broken only by the hum of a distant transformer. I pulled into a spot right under a tall orange sodium light, as if its feeble glow could protect me. I killed the engine and watched. The vehicle, now close enough for me to make out the boxy, dark shape of an old Chevy Blazer or Bronco, didn't park. It slowed to a crawl, then began a slow circuit of the rest area loop, a shark circling its prey. On its first pass, the driver's side window was rolled down. I couldn't see the person inside, just a dark silhouette, but I felt their gaze like a physical touch, cold and assessing. They completed one loop, then another, moving at a funeral pace. On the third pass, they didn't continue. Instead, the Blazer pulled to a stop, facing me, about 50 feet away. The engine remained running, the headlights on, drilling into my Jeep, into me. I was pinned, a butterfly under a spotlight. I fumbled for my phone. No service, no goddamn service. A sob of pure frustration and fear caught in my throat. I was alone. We sat like that for what felt like an eternity, locked in a silent, terrifying standoff. My hand hovered over the ignition. If I ran, they would chase me. If I stayed, what would they do? My eyes darted to the restroom building. Could I make a run for it? The distance seemed like a mile. Then the Blazer's engine revved, a low, aggressive growl. It inched forward. That was all the motivation I needed. I twisted the key, the Jeep roaring to life, and threw it into reverse. I didn't bother to turn around. I just backed out at speed, then slammed it into drive and shot toward the exit, my tires squealing. In the mirror, I saw the Blazer effortlessly swing around and accelerate after me. What followed was the most harrowing hour of my life. I became an animal, all instinct and adrenaline. I pushed the Jeep to its limits, weaving through the sparse traffic, my speedometer needle trembling near 100. The Blazer matched me move for move, a phantom attached to my bumper by an invisible tether. It never got close enough to ram me, never tried to pass. It was just there. A constant, menacing presence hurting me. I tried everything. I took random exits only to jump back on the highway. I sped through sleeping small towns, my headlights sweeping across silent main streets, hoping to draw attention. But the Blazer was always there,